Good morning. All right. Today we're going to be talking about 1 Timothy 4, verses 11 through 12. So if you brought your Bibles, open them up to 1 Timothy 4, 11 through 12. Kind of continuing our theme here through 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy 4, verse 11 says, "Command and teach these things. Let no one despise you for your youth, but set the believers an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, in purity." My mother taught me a lot of things growing up. For instance, she taught me about religion. When I spilled grape juice on the carpet, she taught me I had better pray that came out. She taught me about logic. She told me, because I said so, that's why. She taught me foresight. She always told me to make sure that I had clean underwear on before I went out in case I was in an accident. And she taught me about learning. She'd read stories to me a lot. She read a lot of stories to me. Partly because she was a librarian at the school I went to, but mostly because I think she knew how important reading was. And she would read stories to me all the time. And she taught me to love learning and to love reading. She taught me about teaching as well. She would tell me that teaching was the most important thing that I would ever do in my entire life. I kept thinking, I'm not going to be a teacher. That's not what she meant. She would say, knowledge becomes wisdom when you share it with others. My mother was pretty smart. Today I want to talk to you guys about teaching. How many of you, raise your hands, were or are teachers currently? Keep them up. No, keep them up. I was never a teacher. Keep them up. How many of you have ever taught before? Sunday school or VBS or in school? Keep them up. You add your hands to those. How many of you have ever taught anything to anyone? Ever? That should be everybody. Raise your hands. Raise your hands. Jim, take a picture. That's the people I was telling Shelley about. These are the volunteers for the teaching downstairs on Sunday mornings. These people are all capable. They've all done it once before at least, and they have some experience. So thank you for raising your hands. What is teaching, though? You know, I always like to define things. And so I looked up the definition of teaching. Do you know what the dictionary said? I kid you not. It says the act or profession of a person who teaches. So some of you teachers are laughing because that is not the way you teach definitions in school, is it? I was always taught you never ever define the word with the word or with the root meaning of the word. You don't ever do that, but that is what the dictionary said. So I did my own search and I found one that I think works better. I like this one. Teaching is giving the gift of knowledge to another person. Dan, does that sound pretty good? Sounds pretty good. Giving the gift of knowledge to another person. Teaching is important. It's how others are given the opportunity to learn. It's how others have an opportunity to grow. It's how we come to better understand what we're trying to do. We come to have a better understanding of what it is that we're teaching. How many of you would agree with this statement? I never really understood that until I tried to teach it. Yeah? Yeah? I'd probably do a lot better at math if I tried to teach it. I probably would. I watch with my own kids, we homeschool, and you're sitting there teaching things and you're like, wow, this is a lot harder when I have to take a concept that I understand as a 36-year-old adult and now interpret it in 8-year-old terms. And still get the concept across. Still get the idea across. It's a lot harder than you might think. You have to really, really understand what it is you're doing. Downstairs, my class challenges me. No, never mind. We're not even going there. My class doesn't challenge me. No. They challenge me all the time. They challenge me all the time to do more research, to do better research. The whole point of me getting a master's is to understand material better and to be able to ask better questions. Because when you understand things, you can ask better questions. You're better equipped to handle the tasks that are before you. All of us are teachers. Now I know some of you are sitting out there going, Robert, you keep talking about this teaching stuff, but I'm not really a teacher. That's not one of my spiritual gifts. Here at church, I am blank. But blank is not a teacher. Now, blank may be not a lot of things, but a teacher is not an option. You don't get that option. You have to teach. It wasn't like God said, some of you get to be teachers and some of you don't. He kind of bestowed it upon all of us to be teachers. We're all teachers. Now, we were going to show video, but we had that other video, and so we didn't show it. Maybe I'll show it next week, I don't know. But you guys remember the video. God uses imperfect people. You guys remember that one? Maybe I'll just relay it. You guys remember, it starts out with King David, and he walks in for an interview for teaching a class. And the people are interviewing him, and they said, well, what makes you think that you're qualified? And he says, well, it's that word you said right before my name, king. How many of those am I up against, right? And from there, it's a dismal portrayal of people from the Bible. They break out Moses, whose qualifications are, he's pretty good with a staff, he makes a mean goat sausage. And these are qualifications for being a leader of an entire nation. It talks about Paul. Paul says, I didn't stone Christians, they stoned Christians. Remember? I just held coats. Besides, that was Saul. I'm Paul. Right? And everybody's favorite, everybody remembers Abraham, right? And the woman asked him, and that is when you slept with your wife's maidservant? And Abraham says, what? My wife said she was okay with it. Really? Really? But the point of the video is to show that God uses all sorts of people. He can use us too. He can use us to teach. God uses imperfect people. He has from the beginning. He does today, and He will tomorrow. He uses you and I every day in our lives. I know some of you are just sitting there, oh, Robert, tell me how. How does He use me? I'm just waiting. I'm dying for this, right? I can see the anxiousness in your eyes. I can see how excited you are. Here's the thing, though. If I tell you the secret about how God uses you to teach, I can't take it back. So you have to ask yourself, do you really, really, really want to know how God uses you to teach? Because once I say this, I cannot take it back. You will be burdened with it. You will walk out of here today going, I really wish you wouldn't have said that. I'd put money on it that you're going to walk out of here going, I really wish he wouldn't have said that. Because you're going to have to think about it every day. Do you still want to know how God uses you to teach? We are to be an example. I said it. We are to be an example. Not just to each other, but to those around us, whoever we come in contact with. Now, some of you might be saying, that's not that big a deal. That's a big deal. I remember my parents not liking a behavior that my brother had. He's 8 years younger than me. And my mom came to me and she said, this is your problem. I said, it's not my problem. He's your kid. And she said, no, he is reflecting a behavior you have. And I don't like it in you, and I don't like it in him. He is following your example. And I said, I don't want to be a role model. I'm not his role model. And she said, you didn't get to choose that. We don't get to choose who we're an example to. We are an example to everybody around us. Everybody around us sees us as an example. The example that we live out, we talked about this in class downstairs today, the example that we live out is our biggest teaching moment every day of our lives. People are not as interested in the words we say as they are the actions that we do. The example of the way we live our lives is what is most important to those around us. And some of us, we tend to waste it. Paul tells us to be an example in our speech, in our conduct. No problem, right? No problem. We don't speak no imperfect English, do we? Speaking, I think I died. Well, we'll just stay on teaching then. Speaking is one thing that we overlook a lot. Sometimes we don't think that our speech is an example of who we are. We talked about this in class. Jim brought it up. How do you know when you're sitting around with somebody that somebody is an intelligent person? Their speech, their actions. How do you know if somebody's not an intelligent person? Their speech, their actions. How do you know if somebody's a Christian? Speech, their actions. Speech is important. Now I know some of you go, well, it's important, Robert, but when I'm in my car, nobody really hears what I'm saying about the other really bad drivers around me. Yeah, they do. You children hear that. I get that one back a lot of times. There's a lot of bad drivers in this world. I wish everybody drove as well as I did. But a lot of those people on the road are terrible. And when they cut me off or do something, I'll go, dummy. And Daisy will go, dummy? No, don't say that, sweetie. Daddy, you said it. I might go, dang. Daisy will go, Daddy, dang's a bad word. You shouldn't say dang. You just said dang and it's a bad word. Daisy, stop. But you said dang, Daddy. No, Daisy, stop. I have a 3-year-old grammatical corrector. Just rides around with me everywhere I go sometimes. Sometimes people cut us off in traffic and make us mad and we say things, but from the safety of our own car. Maybe sometimes mumbling under our breath or just to another person, we say something about somebody else, another man or another woman that degrades them to something less than a child of God in which they were made to be. Sometimes, maybe it's not like that at all. Maybe we're not trying to insult somebody, but maybe we just use really fancy words and big $5 words to sound really important and bigger and better than the people that are around us, and we talk circles around them. Anybody here ever had circles talked around them? Yeah. If you haven't, go to a used car lot. They'll have a lot of fun with you. It's frustrating. It's frustrating when people use language to twist things and turn things around. When I was in school, I wasn't a Christian at all. I was a devout atheist in a lot of ways. Probably really more agnostic. Didn't know what that meant, so it sounded like I had some sort of disease, so I just called myself an atheist. You know what I wanted to be when I grew up? I wanted 2 things. I wanted to go into the business world and make lots of money selling shoes for Nike. I have no idea how I was going to do that. The second thing, if that didn't work out, I wanted to be a spin doctor. How many of you know what a spin doctor is? Politicians hire spin doctors to write speeches for them. So when they blow it, you can make them look good. What a charming profession. What a horrible idea. Our speech can betray us. It can really, really betray us. And sometimes we don't mean for it to be that way. But Paul is telling us that our speech needs to bring glory to God in everything that we say. These are the times that Paul is warning us about. The times where we slip up, when we think nobody is listening, and we think nobody cares, and we think we're smarter than somebody else, and we think we have the right to pass judgment on somebody else, even though they're not going to hear it, we're just going to whisper it to our friend. These are the times Paul is saying, you are an example with your speech. Be a godly example. Hey, we're moving again. That's cool. Aha. Okay, now what about conduct? Let's see if we can get to conduct. Oh, did I already pass it? We'll go back to conduct. There we go. What about your conduct? Conduct is the way you act. So you tell me next week, hey Robert, somebody cut me off in traffic and I didn't swear him at all. You know what I'm going to ask you? I'm going to say, great. Did you maybe make a gesture at him though? Hey, it didn't have to be that gesture, guys. I mean, you could just looked at him cross-eyed. It's still a gesture. Did you make some sort of gesture at them for cutting you off? Did you get angry? Did you speed up? Did you slow down? Did you cut them off and then slow down? That's one of my personal favorites, right? Or like we talked about in class, did you chase them down, follow them to the Starbucks, and then threaten to buy their coffee for them? I thought that'd be a Christianly thing. Somebody said that was just creepy. It's a fair warning, don't cut me off. What about our conduct, though? Do we maybe think about it and, we can control our speech, but do we really have to control our conduct too, God? I mean, can't we just start with the speech? Isn't that just enough? You know, God says, it's not enough. He says, yeah, you can start with it if that's where you want to start, but it's not enough. I know you're so much more than what you're giving because I made you. That's what he says. So maybe traffic's not your problem. Maybe you're my wife and you never drive. And you just have to put up with a husband that gets upset. So maybe traffic's not your problem. What about last week when you were sitting in the mall and you saw that mother that maybe had the clothes a little too tight or a little too short and the kids were acting up and misbehaving? Did you look at her like she was a child of God or something less? Maybe you couldn't sleep a couple nights ago and you got up and you just happened to be surfing the web. It's completely safe, right? And you accidentally fell on that page that may or may not have been appropriate. May or may not have shown people that were lewd or naked. Was that pleasing to God? Was that action bringing praise to God? Not hardly. But this is what happens to us in our daily lives. We get so caught up in what's happening around us. Sometimes we forget that God is sitting right there next to us. That we're not really alone. What about when somebody came to you and said, I don't believe in your God, you're just a Jesus freak? How'd you handle that situation? Did you extend your hand of grace, the Word of God in it, and slap them upside the head, hoping that they might learn by osmosis? Or maybe you said, oh, bless your heart, which is standard Christianity for, I'm about to judge you. Right? Oh, bless your heart. Or did you look them square in the eye and say something like, maybe I too struggle to understand who my God is. And I'm trying to understand. And if you'd like to try with me, I'd sure like to buy you a cup of coffee or something to eat. Maybe one of those actions is better than another. I don't know. But our actions will betray us if they're not godly. Now, I know we talked about this downstairs too. So much of what my sermons are anymore are relating to what's happening in our class downstairs because we've been studying the book of Ephesians. And it's a funny thing about the book of Ephesians. Paul kind of lays it on the line. He kind of says, this is what Christians are supposed to be about. I think that's important. We talked about this downstairs. God is the God of the universe. He can do whatever He wants. He doesn't need me for an example. Right? Sometimes we sit there in the pew and we think, I don't need to be the example. God doesn't need me. He can move mountains without me. I am insignificant. And I don't think He really is here with me, is what you're saying. I don't think He's really participating with me. We talked about that downstairs. It is important to God because as a father, He wants to see His children mirror His image. It brings Him great joy. And I know as a father, it brings great joy to my heart when I see my children act like me when I act appropriately. Not so much when I act inappropriately. Here's the thing about our Father, though. He never acts inappropriately. So when we're mimicking those things, we're not mimicking our Father. And it's embarrassing to Him. Our speech and our actions, the way we teach the rest of the world, shows in our speech and our actions. This last time that I went down to ACU, I haven't shared this with you guys. I had to take several assessments, which is a big fancy word for surveys. And they were required by the college. In fact, I just took the last one. No, I even put it in my notes as the last one. I just now remembered I have one more coming in the mail. I took one of my last ones last week, and it was 501 questions. That's a lot of little bubbles to fill in. But they all kind of ask the same thing, except for the one that's coming in the mail. It's a marriage assessment. Hopefully Sandra and I pass. They all ask the same kind of questions. How would you handle this in ministry? Where do you see ministry doing this? How do you see this? How do you see that? They're all observations of you personally. But they all have one kind of common question that they all asked. They asked, is the church still relevant today? Is the church still relevant today? Not will the church be relevant tomorrow, but is it relevant today? Not was it relevant at some point, but is it relevant today? I talked to some people about that question, and some of them would answer no, they said. And these were people, not necessarily in this church, but they were in the bigger body of Christ. And they said no. They said no because the church has failed to be an example. We have failed to be the example of Christ in our teaching and in our words and our actions. These are the direct comments I got from people. Funny how they tied into this. The church has failed to live out who Christ is. My mother didn't fail to teach me things. And my father didn't fail to teach me things. And my God surely didn't fail to teach me things. I may have failed to listen. I may have failed to see the connection that I too am a teacher. I may have failed to see the importance of being an example. I may have failed to realize that God is everywhere, that God is watching, and God is a part of my life. This week, 2 men from this congregation, I'll let them remain nameless. I was not one of them. 2 men from this congregation went up to Longmont to see if they could help out with the disaster relief. They went to a church in Longmont. They helped unload a truck and sort stuff. And that church decided to go ahead and have church service. And these 2 men asked, well, how are people going to get the products that we just unloaded? And they said, well, if they need the products, they'll come by the church. These 2 men said, no. That's not the action of Christians. We're not to sit by and wait to catch fish that happen to swim by. We are to go out and seek and save. So these two men, they went out to try to find people they could help. They found some. They went back to the church and said, we found people that want some, they have some needs. Can we take some of the supplies with us? And the church said, absolutely. So they loaded up their vehicle and they took out water and cleaning supplies and food. And they went out and began distributing it in the neighborhood. And they turned down this street and they turned down that street and they turned down another street. And they were about to wrap it up. And one of them said, no, let's go down one more street. We still have some supplies. Let's go down one more street. Okay, so they went down one more street. They felt compelled to go down this street. And they see a garage door open. And they think, well, maybe this is somebody that needs help. So they stop. And they're looking for somebody. And they find, how shall I say this appropriately, a little senior citizen, female, over the age of 80. Outside in her yard trying to move her furniture and stuff back into her garage before nightfall. And they think, here's our opportunity. Ma'am, do you need some help? And she looked at them and with almost tears in her eyes, she said, bless you, yes, I do need help. And they said, great, we have water and we have cleaning supplies and we have food. What can we give you? And she looked at him like she just didn't even hear him. I am so grateful that you're here to help me. I didn't know how I was going to move all this stuff. And they thought to themselves, no, she's misunderstanding. We brought water and we brought clean stuff. We didn't come here to help her move her stuff. She said, I was sitting here praying to God that He would send somebody my way to help me move my stuff. They helped her move her stuff. They went back this Saturday with a bigger group and helped her do more stuff and helped her neighbor do stuff. Because God is alive. For those that don't think God is involved in their life, they think that God's not watching and God is clueless as to what you're doing. I'll give you this one warning. My God's not dead. He's not sick. And He is aware of what is going on. He's aware of what we are doing and what we are not doing. And He is aware that He wants all of us to be teachers. And He's aware that some of us don't want to fulfill that. Our God is a lot smarter than we think sometimes. And He is a lot more alive than we know.